Okay.
Did you almost bring a computer?
No, but I didn't bring water either, which I used to do back in the day, so very abnormal.
Is Dave not making
Slacker.
Yeah.
Said the guy who missed the last meeting.
Can I ask a technical question?
Yes.
We have 3 speakers heard, and do they all know that we're meeting in person?
Okay, all right. We do, and that actually is the announcement before we start the meeting today, that we are being recorded. That's what the iPads are, and a couple mics throughout the room, so we can capture audio tonight. So this will be recorded. And besides that, welcome to an in-person meeting. First one in a long time. We will strategically clap at certain points to help Hector coordinate the sound. We'll cue up. We'll need to clap. Apparently it shows like a huge spike in the sound wave.
It's
so
not.
You know where to, like,
It's not applause. You just want to do it once.
yeah.
And where's the camera?
Audio only today. Alright guys, that's a little practice to see how we've been doing. We're all going to clap together just once. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. That's how we get started.
All right. So I will call the Callan City Council special meeting of March 30th, 2022 to order at 5 p.m. Roll call, please.
Councilor Clark.
Here.
Councilor Nemiroff.
Here.
Councilor Breiter.
Here.
Councilor Mestizo is absent. Councilor Byers.
Here.
Councilor Carter Miller.
Here.
And Mayor Harris Flood.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Hector. Item number 2 on the agenda is meeting accessibility. 2.1, opportunity to interpret meeting into Spanish. Hector?
Is there a question for the public? If any attendees need this meeting translated into Spanish, please raise your hand now. La pregunta para el público. Si alguien necesita esta reunión interpretada en español, por favor, haz su mano. And I'll watch the attendees if anybody would like the meeting translated.
Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is speakers heard on non-agenda item. We have 3 speakers. One is coming back to another meeting, so we'll move on to speaker number 2, and that is Lynette Fleming.
Oh, I'm not going to speak. I'm just here to hear Alex's report.
Oh, great. Okay. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. The next person is Jeff Burnside. Okay, and we're not, are we also on Zoom? So this is just, okay, so, all right. So no speakers tonight. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 4, which is item 4.1 is the City Council meetings from March 16th, 2022. Has the council had a chance to read the minutes? Are there any comments or edits?
I did have one, and I didn't email you about this, I'm sorry. There was, I don't know how important this is, there was like a timestamp that wasn't correct, just for the public hearing. It went from 27 minutes to 1 hour and 13. And then there were just a couple of name misspellings with John and Derek. But other than that, it was great.
And Chris, last name is L-U-C.
Oh, yes.
L-U-C.
We can go ahead and pass the minutes with those corrections.
Yeah.
That's right. So as long as there's no substantive changes and they're all edits, we don't even have to, they're noted, so it wouldn't even be passing as amended. So are there any, but they do need to be pointed out, so thank you so much. Councilor, and for the record, that was Councilor Payra and Miller. Are there any other comments or edits?
Yeah, point of order, I should abstain, right? Because I wasn't at this meeting. Is that how that works?
Right.
Okay, will do.
And that was Councilor Clark for the record. Yeah. So if you guys will let me recognize you before we get started so I can speak it into the record.
There you go.
Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion. Councilor Panamarev?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call. All those in favor? Do you still want a roll call, Hector? For the record? Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilor Park,
Abstain.
Councilor Brennan,
Yes.
Councilor Greider,
Yes.
Councilor Pacific is absent, Councilor Byers,
Yes.
and Councilor Parham.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mayor.
Thank you, Hector. Item number 5 on the agenda is 5.1, discuss priorities, values, and give feedback to HUD funding action plan. Staff report?
Yes, so on March 2nd, at our last regular city council meeting, we had Alex Campbell from OHCS come and give a presentation on an action plan they're developing for how OHCS will help distribute HUD funding through the Cdbg Disaster Recovery Grant. We're inviting Alex back tonight just to continue that conversation and continue to brainstorm what's going on in town to help inform the priorities and values of the action plan. So Alex, I would love to invite you to my seat, and I'm happy to pull up any of last time's slides or anything like that, if helpful. Yeah. Do you want me to pull up your slides?
Let's have them available.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, welcome Alex.
Mayor, council members, Alex Campbell, Oregon Housing and Community Services. Glad to be back.
I'm experiencing like this is an experience to all be back together in a room for the first time. And to be really just looking up and having a speaker show up face to face was a moment. Glad to have you here.
Good. Well, yeah, appreciate the opportunity. I guess I just start by letting you all know. I imagine the mayor may have told some of you, but when we presented our community engagement plan to the Housing Stability Committee, which is our governing body, we recommended that we form an ad hoc committee with some members of the Housing Stability Council and some other folks to represent the impacted regions to come together and advise us and advise them as we're putting together the draft action plan. So I asked Mayor Ayers Flood to join that group. It's just 11 people, so Rep Marsh, Andy Valtierra Sanchez, who both is a member of this community and also a member of the Governor's Racial Justice Committee, will be the 3 Southern Oregon representatives on that body. Mary Lee and Professor Sandoval would be the Housing Stability Council members. I've asked Christy Munoz from Columbia Willamette, I think United Way, but she's been doing a lot of work with culturally specific community-based organizations around the state that are involved in disaster recovery and response. And we asked the chair of the McKenzie River Valley Long-Term Recovery Group and Commissioner Bethel from Marion County to serve on that body. So we are hard at work right now putting together both a report on what we've heard back from folks and also the online survey that we have and an initial proposal for them to react to next Thursday. So very opportune time if there's additional input that you all want to add. I didn't prepare much in the way of remarks. Just here to, I think, answer any questions you have and hear additional input from the council.
Great, and if I can make a comment on that, I'm certainly honored to be asked and really looking forward to serving in this capacity. And in this role, I really want to show up as a representative of this council. So every opportunity that I get to bring back anything and look for your feedback, I'll be looking at timing and access to the council to get your feedback and show up as a representative of the city of Talon. Also for the staff as well. So with that, does anybody want to jump in with, has anybody?
And or if you would like, I could share a little bit more about sort of the categories of spending that we're thinking about. And this is very much sort of real time. As I said, this week we're spending a lot of time together every day with our consultant team and beginning to lay out. We laid out sort of a dozen types of activities that we think one might want to include in a first action plan. And so I'll apologize, I'll do this off the top of my head, but I think I can remember the key points. So in terms of housing, thinking about homeownership replacement programs, so funding to help people replace their manufactured home or stick-built home. Hopefully, manufactured homes being replaced with modular homes or a higher level of construction. That would be one area. Continued rent assistance. We know that there's a lot of this housing that's not going to be ready, and we still have people in interim solutions that we don't necessarily have funding to continue currently. The new homeownership program, so programs that would help folks who are renters at the time of the disaster who may wish to become homeowners, and funding to assist the development of multifamily, well, I should say affordable rental housing, particularly in some of the canyons, the Santiago and Mackenzie Canyon, particularly in the Mackenzie River Valley. There are no incorporated cities, so large multi-unit rentals are probably not the way that we're going to be able to replace the rental stock there. So that might be as small scale as supporting the development of accessory dwelling units. So those are sort of the four categories of housing that we're thinking about. In terms of infrastructure, we're thinking about investments that directly support housing development, investments that are more at the municipal level that still support housing development, thinking about particularly wastewater capacity, which is a real issue for some of the communities that were really hit hard, and drinking water capacity. And then there's another, also, maybe we could structure that as either a grant-based sort of application structured approach, or we could just do some formula grants for that kind of expenditure down to counties or city governments. And then there are some service areas that, and I don't know if I really made that clear in my first presentation to you. Pretty much any of the Cdbg eligible activities is eligible under this grant. So we're thinking particularly about perhaps legal services and other services that are going to be important to folks as they're navigating, their rebuild process. And that could include mental health, which is sort of just more general assistance to survivors with their all aspects of their personal recovery. And then finally a category of there are eligible planning activities, so planning related to economic recovery, planning related to housing recovery, or more generally planning related to disaster recovery as a whole. And then the final category would be direct support for economic revitalization. So those are sort of the buckets that we're thinking about in terms as staff. And I mean, I don't know whether it's appropriate to sort of tell you, or whether it's helpful for me to tell you sort of what our initial thoughts are, or I mean, maybe we can have a discussion, and I don't want to prejudice you all, but I'd be happy to share that if you'd like.
Anybody? I'd be interested in hearing what those thoughts are right now.
Okay, sure. So we've done sort of a straw poll of all of our team, and the first four housing buckets were 3 or 4 of those housing buckets were on everybody's list. So I think one of our questions is this should we be including the multifamily affordable housing development in part one of the plan? We've got a lot of money that we've put out already. We just went through a round of lift and funded several more affordable rental projects. So maybe we would focus on the individual survivors over the coming year. So that's sort of what we're thinking. And then across those other areas, there was not a strong consensus that among the group that any of the other areas really had to be in that first action plan. So just want to emphasize again, we will amend this action plan. And so the question really is, which are the programs that we want to focus on and really prioritize and stand up first? I don't think there's not necessarily, I shouldn't say that. I think the reason one might not include other programs is the reality of how many programs we can stand up at once, and not setting false expectations about the number of programs that we'll be able to stand up and get out. And I think that's partly reflective of Ryan Flynn, our director's experience of working on DR plans that had 10 programs in them, and they never actually got to the second half of the list. So yeah, I mean, that's where we are, and I think it'll be really. I'm really looking forward to our discussion on the 7th, because we've got community representative of the impacted areas that I suspect will make the case that maybe there are some other things that we should.
Councilor Penamara?
Yeah, so it sounds like this is action plan 1, and there's going to be some more action plans as time progresses. Can you give an idea of how the money's going to be split among the action plans and how many there will be?
Yeah, so grantees have up to 6 years to expend their dollars from the time that their their action plan is approved. I really hope that we will have a large majority of that money spent years before that time. But I guess the technical term is that we have an action plan, and then we do substantial amendments. We can do minor amendments too, but substantial amendments are basically any time you change a program or you change an allocation. And I don't believe that it's structured such that we would, in the action plan, put a contingency item or an unallocated amount. I think what we are likely to do is to overfund, particularly the home replacement program, because we know that's an area that we absolutely don't want to run out of money in, and it's really hard for us to estimate at this time exactly how many people will be eligible, because we have the low moderate income requirements to deal with. And so the expectation going forward would be, as we understand how much headroom or extra money that we have there, to start reallocating that to other areas. And the substantial amendment can basically change anything in the action plan. And in terms of the number, I understand the state of New Jersey has a disaster recovery grant from 4 or 5 years ago on one of the big hurricanes, and they're on their 30th substantial amendment. I dearly hope that we don't approach that record. But
Was that New Jersey?
Yeah.
So it's one plan that you just keep amending, not like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3.
Councilor Penamara? And then, okay, Councilor Byers, and then Councilor Penamara.
Thanks. I'm wondering if this funding for rebuilding and home replacement
Mhm.
can require specific rebuilding parameters to make communities more resilient, and often those are more expensive. And if that funding is taking that into account.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually required to do that under the HUD program. So, yes. And part of what we are thinking about in terms of actual delivery would be the state doing bulk orders of modular homes, so we could really control that quality, the design, make sure that they're correctly built for long-term accessibility, to make sure that they have the fire resilience, make sure that they're energy efficient. And we think at the scale that we're going to be working, we could, stimulate some new types of housing. That was a terrible run-on sentence. Another part of the reason that we're thinking in those terms is we know a lot of the folks who are still really struggling with their recovery, going through the process of ordering a manufactured home and dealing with that complexity and siting that home and all those things can be a big barrier to them. So to the extent that we can take on a lot of that work and also make sure that they're getting a quality product, and they're not being, taken advantage of in any way by a manufacturer or a builder, we think is something that would be good for us to do.
So what would that look like?
So as an application process, it would look pretty similar to the programs that we're running today. We would, I think, very likely work with Access and other organizations that are currently sort of funneling people to Access. And so there would be an application process if folks were approved. As folks are approved, before folks are approved, we would start working this summer. We would probably put together a request for information or a request for capabilities nationally about the kinds of products that we'd like to acquire, so we can understand price points, including maybe some informal discussions with St. Vincent de Paul. The legislature recently made a $50 million grant to them in Wayne County to establish a nonprofit-owned manufactured home production facility. And we think partnering with them could be an interesting way to go for some portion of this product. So we would start working on figuring out what our options are, more or less immediately. And then once we start getting a sense that, we've got 50 or 100, we're ready to order 50 or 100 units to go out and buy in bulk those units. And then work with folks to help them site them.
Thank you.
Councilor Greider?
You mentioned some funding for homeownership, and I think if I heard you right, those that didn't own homes before the fire could be eligible. So what does that, are those folks still funneled through like their DCM or through they've still been working with a case manager, or how is the proof of eligibility? They were still need to have been fire affected, but had a rental that they lost? Or?
Right. So, and just to be clear, we haven't worked out, exactly what the right method is, other than we know that probably a local organization is the right folks for them to work with, not, try to deal with sale. But yeah, so folks who are renters and were impacted by the disaster, displaced from the disaster, and I think, and I know there's been a lot of challenges that we need to think through in terms of what, in addition to having a rental agreement, would be adequate evidence of that. But yes, so, there's a built-in cap above the 80%. I think it's up to 120% or 150% of area median income that we would make, that folks would be eligible for that kind of assistance. And it would look probably like a down payment assistance program. Just helping folks with that down payment assistance so they could, one, not have to come up with that down payments, but two, that they've got enough equity going in so they don't have to pay mortgage insurance and those other costs that inflate the cost.
And that is confirmed part of the plan or not?
So that's what we're going to be working out over the next couple months. It's one of the things that I've heard the most interest about.
Yeah, it sounds really great to get people into, an almost better situation than they.
Councilor Panamarev?
Yeah, and that was actually one of my questions. It sounds, what we saw was that people who owned homes were much more resilient and able to come back faster than folks who were either, in a mobile home park or, renters. So it sounds like the first, one of the key aspects of this is increasing housing inventory. And I'm just wondering if you have projections on what you might be able to do with that, what that looks like.
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's a mean question.
Yeah. I don't mind saying that that's a good question, and we haven't done a lot of work there.
It's a hard one.
So, no, we haven't thought in terms of sort of goals for how much how many additional units in different areas that we would want to see. And we are thinking about what are sort of our performance metrics above and beyond what just HUD requires us to report. So I think that's a really interesting one to consider.
If I can follow up. And then talking about, from Nicole's question about the other thing that would be great to be able to quantify is how many people, more people are transitioning into homeownership after this, and especially those populations who've been held back historically. And then
that one we have thought.
Yes, no, I mean definitely,
Yes,
but
absolutely.
just to quantify that, because I think that was one of the biggest things that people were talking about after the fire, equity and equity, right? And then I also read in the appendix A that talked about what Cdbg funds could be used for. It sounded like, what you're saying on holding down payment and stuff. Would setting up a housing authority, helping a nonprofit or municipality set up some sort of like a housing authority to carry on that kind of work be part of that? Or is it what this money needs to be used for just direct to folks towards their down payment?
That's a good question. I don't know. I can certainly.
And I don't know which is better. I'm not sure I'm advocating one or the other, but I'm thinking yes, there's people in need right now, but then also, to kind of set something up that will continue this kind of work, outliving the grant itself would be, I think we're considering, but I'm not sure that I'm advocating strongly one or the other. It's something to think about.
I'm reasonably confident that you could fund something like that, but I think the question is does that count as, would you have to count that as an administrative cost, or could you include that as a program cost, or would that fall
And there's
perhaps in the
percentages
planning cost,
that
and
you
you
have
have
to-
maximums
Okay,
in each
yeah,
of those categories.
totally understand.
Councilor Clark?
Is all of the money allocated through this initial action plan and proposal process, or is it some of it withheld, and then that goes to fund the modifications to the plan over time.
And I have not been through this before, so I apologize for the caveats, but I have asked that question. My understanding is we would expect to allocate all of the money, and that we would, that we would allocate all of the money, and with the expectation that we're probably over allocating in some areas, and that would be money that we would be able to reallocate later. But I don't think that there is sort of a budget cap. We literally have a form that we're developing the action plan in. I mean, it's going to be a 150-page document with fields filled in. So I don't believe there actually is a budget category for unallocated.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're sort of forced to say an allocation for all the dollars.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Panamre?
So the way this is looking, does any of the money come directly to municipalities for us to use in some way to help achieve the goals?
So it certainly could. And we're thinking about it first in terms of defining, what we want to get done. And then once we figure that out, then consider, well, if you're going to do X activity, what's the best way to do it? So, I mean, if we're going to fund planning activities, my thought would be there's not a lot of planning activity you really want the state to do, but that you may want to consider having the state deal with the procurement, and so that we could make teams available to you all that you would direct, or we could just make it a proportional allocation, or we could make it a grant-based process where you need to tell us what you want to do and how much money you want to do it. I mean, those are all possible ways to do it. It's just reminding me that I think part of the complexity is the HUD rules. So whatever we let you all do with dollars, we have to set program rules for you, and we are all ultimately responsible for making sure that you're within those program rules.
So that's more the administrative bucket?
Yes, and so in some cases, like bulk purchase of modular units, we think it's pretty clear that it would make sense to centralize that and not ask all of the 7 counties to go about trying to acquire units and manage those funds. I think in the other areas, it's an open question in our minds, sort of what makes the most sense. I don't know if you currently have any Cdbg grants. It's one of the more onerous reporting forms of money. So I think staff and elected officials may have slightly different opinions about how much you want that to be devolved.
Again, I wasn't, when I think of taking something on, I think, oh my gosh, we don't have the capacity for it. A lot of the time, unless it was like, But then also, I think that when this work is done, we'll still be here, right? And we want to continue some of the good work to make our community more resilient.
Right. So I think there are opportunities for us to think about ways that you all help and direct dollars, and then we figure out the most efficient way to administer that and get those activities done.
Councilor Panamre, and then Councilor Clark.
So this is a little off topic, but I was thinking about the TGM grant. Do you have any updates for us on that? The
bite my tongue. I will say that we're going to be doing some open houses locally in May once we're in the public comment period on this Cdbg plan, and I am talking to both the LCD staff and Karen Wheeler at the LTRG to see if we might want to, have more than one topic at those open houses if they're ready in May to start laying out where they're at.
They did help out. I take it.
I think on that subject, I think I actually asked Pam the same question the other day. She reached out to Josh and I got a copy of the email and I see what's happened and I also see that it's grown since the beginning, and I think it might be a good idea if we could talk to Jordan about getting a proper update of where you're at before those open houses begin, because I think those inform the questions we want to ask.
Yeah.
So if we could just get a layout of what's happened since the beginning. For those of us who just remember what it started off to be, and I understand it's a lot more than that at this point, I think it'd be helpful if we could set that up, Jordan, with whoever's working on it. That would be great.
Yeah.
And so with that, I'm going to take Councilor Clark's question.
I'm not sure if I understood what you said earlier. It seemed like in regards to the affordable rental housing, there was a question of money already allocated towards that was sufficient, and how much that should be included in this. Is that was the...
Yeah, and just to be clear, I was doing my best to just share with you all what our internal staff level discussions are. Definitely not anything about what decisions have been made, but just about what we are thinking about proposing next week to the advisory committee. But yeah, one thought that has been shared would be that maybe that multifamily affordable housing makes sense to hold off on right now, because there are a lot of projects already under development.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it makes sense to pause a little bit in terms of funding more multifamily affordable rental housing and see how much of the need the projects that are in the pipeline address, because there are, depending on how you count it, sort of 6 to 8 different projects currently in some form of planning with some level of funding in this area already.
In Jackson County?
Yeah.
I have a question, and I'm only gonna ask one because I get a seat at the table. So, but as far as like land acquisition, in the beginning, you talked about how that's not as much of a focus because there has been some acquisition through the LIFT program. And to be clear, that LIFT money is not any part of this.
Correct. That's just the state. The state had the LIFT program, and the legislature set aside some of that for the fire.
And is there any of that money left?
There was, so that we set up separate pre-applications for both the homeownership and the rental lift, and sub-allocated those by region. The rental was significantly oversubscribed in this region, but it was undersubscribed, I think, in the Clackamas and maybe Marion County bucket. So we were able to reallocate a little bit more to this area, but it wasn't the full amount. So there is some portion of those pre-applications that are going to need to compete with the full lift pool. In homeownership, it wasn't fully subscribed, the pre-application for the fire affected community. So that money is now available for the general competition of anybody who came in for homeownership.
Great. And so I mean, I think what we've been hearing from the beginning in this community is that a model like the one that CASA is building at Talent Mobile Estates is really the kind of not just ownership of the mobile homes, But the complication of buying mobile homes or helping buy mobile homes and then putting them on somebody else's site where they drive the rents after that. So I would hope that acquisition would still, even though I understand the logic of putting it, after all that lift, would hope that acquisition for those types of models would still be worth discussing, because I do think it makes the idea of helping get folks into their own mobile home more sustainable over the long term if they're not also then burdened by,
So just to make sure that I understand your suggestion is consider a pot of money that would be specifically for land acquisition for sort of alternative ownership
Right.
parks where
Right.
you've got manufactured or modular.
for cooperatives and that kind of thing, right? So maybe just a certain classification or something.
I just want to add, I really support that.
Yep.
I thought that was already in there, but if it's not, definitely, that's kind of neat.
Absolutely.
I think just an overarching theme of shared equity in every opportunity that we have is really what this community supports a lot. And then finally, I want to say, I brought it up at the last meeting, I'll bring it up again, and it won't be a surprise because I really started focusing on economic revitalization. And our community took a huge hit. And I do think that it's worth considering that as part of action, that there's really a short-term need and there's a long-term need. And we're building plans around that with a study that we got from SOU survey. We're just beginning in that process. And I do think that it's worth having a conversation about what are the immediate needs and to help the businesses that have weathered this storm to sustain, and then more long-term, how do we revitalize? I would suspect that that an immediate plan wouldn't be as expensive as a long-term plan, but I do think I'm going to probably continue to talk about that, especially in talent. We maintain our individuality with our businesses in many ways, and I think they're getting desperate.
Yeah, well, I hope you do come and advocate for that, and I'm sure Commissioner Bethel will as well. I think one of the challenges, as you say, about the longer term is it's not immediately clear to me exactly what scale of investments really make a difference and what you would want to do with them. Which drives me to thinking about maybe you want to invest some more money in planning over the next year or two to really define that and flesh that out. But please do come and make that.
And I agree with what you just said. I think that is, providing immediate resources and then long-term planning is probably what that would end up looking like. All right, we have another topic on the agenda tonight. Is there any other? Well, I hope you're hearing housing from and ownership, and shared equity, and as everybody is agreeing with that. So,
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Did you get what you needed from this meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alex. And thank you for the great work that you guys are doing. Yeah. All right. Item 5.2 on the agenda is adopt citywide goals. Staff report.
All right, well, I want to give a big thank you and big shout out to everyone here for not only being part of making the goals, but all the great feedback I got. Sorry, I'm scrolling down to a report I made today. So I want to go ahead and present to you all the changes that were made to the latest draft that you all reviewed to make sure that they're all comfortable for you guys. And I will ask council to move forward with adoption of these goals, either with these edits, with only some of these edits, etc. So I will go ahead and show those edits.
So optimally, we would be adopting the goals as amended. Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's the optional. Just so you all know, these here are the substantive changes. Really appreciate those who caught my spelling errors. Those are not included in those. Those have been incorporated. First up on affordable housing. The counselors really highlighted how aging in place is important because Talent is a higher population that is higher than the rest of the county. Economic development, this one actually came out of the staff. Really recognizing they felt one of the barriers for businesses to be able to start in town is because our code is very complicated for them to navigate. So they would like to do a review of our code and policies to figure out how we can better support businesses that want to get established and want to be brick and mortar here in town.
Sorry. I can't actually read that. My eyes aren't good enough
Oh yeah,
to read it.
It's in the
I think you're reading it out loud. Is it in the report? I apologize.
Of course, this will be on page 501.
It looks like this.
Yes, perfect.
Eleanor, do you want mine?
Thanks, Miguel.
Great. Sharon is Karen.
Thank you.
And some here. Transportation, both staff and council members raised some flags here that I was unaware of, so I appreciate it. We tend to make a more general plan of walking trail through town. CID specifically has a lot of property ownership difficulties, and there's a lot of other great areas in town that have potential locations. And then also to really establish the designated bicycle network, which is something that's in our TSP, so that folks can know where the bicycle avenues are, routes are around town. Was one that was several people made bicycle comments, so we wanted to make sure to include that. And then last, substantive changes in the sustainability category. One council member brought up a great point that it's just not a major event, there's also now regular events occurring with wildfire smoke, extreme heat, and extreme cold. And so really calling out that we are focusing on that as a city, on how to establish the plans, the cooling centers, as well as help people be safer at home themselves, particularly as we adjust to this new climate world. And then the make a build back thing that you see in the bottom there, I just want to make that clearer for the post-emergency response. That came up in our brainstorming session. That's for, if a disaster were to occur, we have our EOP, which really lasts us for that kind of immediate period. But then after that, having recommendations in place like, great, set up a temporary emergency accommodation with the order. Next step, make sure that you start allowing these water code things to occur. Things that we've lessons learned that we could automatically know that we need to put into place more quickly to help folks.
I can't remember the exact title. Emergency response coordinator position still coming about.
So fully funded, a week ago I got permission from the union that position can move ahead, so I'm planning on posting it. Yeah.
Councilor Palmer?
Yeah, when you described it, a build back better plan, some of it is not actually have anything to do with actually building, which is more long term. It's kind of like the immediate and the intermediary, and et cetera. So now I think I understand it much better. So, cool.
Councilor Clark?
Yeah, on the transportation piece, I don't see that a trail along Wagner Creek and a designated bicycle network are exclusive of each other. Just wondering why adding the one resulted in the crossing out of the other.
For the same reason that I felt like the Wagner Creek Trail was both a subset of the bicycle network as well as the walking trail.
Okay.
It is the MRTSP and one of our top park priorities.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the previous item speaks to that.
Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay. Cool with that.
Any more questions I can answer? You all also
have the full packet as well.
And I just want to mention, because I got this clarification from Jordan along the way, that, you know, these are just buckets that we're creating, and we'll be able to see the detail as we move along. Do you have anything you want to add to that, what that would look like? Or, I mean, those are plans you'd be bringing to the council for adoption, that kind of thing, right?
Well, my goal is yes. So what I would like to do now, we're establishing these goals. They'll help us prioritize where we put resources in this current budget and what types of categories. And then throughout the year, as we're actually taking actions, when I come to council with an idea of, hey, we want to take a step, we want to do something, I would want to link it to one of the goals within our citywide goal plan. So that we can all be aware of what are the categories that we're really excelling in, and actually filling which ones are we missing, so the council can also provide direction to staff saying, hey, we're falling short on our economic development category, we need to request the agenda and update plans. You know, this type of document allows a lot of flexibility for particular committees and commissions. You know, we ask committees and commissions to look within our big goals and highlight what they want to focus in on, what they can add in on the things that their priorities for the year. Stuff like that. The other category that we're not able to get in here, but I do want to get in front of you all for the first quarter, is a list of actual measures that we can use to actually see is what we're doing and having the outcome that we intended. A lot of times we'll do big tasks but not really understand that actually help us move the needle on where we want to be as a community. So that's something that's currently ongoing.
Any other questions? Councilor Penamrath and then Councilor Byers.
I think you just said this, but so we could, you know, if we have a good idea, we can ask for something in the budget that isn't necessarily named in here, right, in this budget. Very good.
Or we could ask for further detail on some things that are named, and then they can be vetted by the staff and brought to it as a proposal, right? Did I miss? Councilor Byers?
Just as I'm looking at these things, this thought came to me as Alex was talking, so I'm so sorry I didn't email you with this further earlier. As we are looking at hopefully attracting new businesses to the area for economic development purposes, is there a way we can, this is a multi-parter question. One, I know So Ready does some market research for the valley at a larger scale to help attract businesses of a certain size or larger to the area. I'm wondering if there is any way we could ask for their help, and potentially it might, some funding from this past HUD subject that we were just discussing, to help create a market study for talent, to assist business owners who have an idea, refine their idea, so it can potentially be the most successful version of that before they start implementing. Rather than, you know, having a small business owner come in and throw spaghetti at the wall to see what works for them.
And I actually believe that Tura did create a market study in partnership with Business in Ashland.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm currently hunting down where that market study is.
Great.
But I think it's most recent enough that's still highly relevant for talent.
Okay, great.
So we'd love to share that with you all as well as with the community.
But to that point, is it otherwise, if we could just take a quick look at the economic development goals, is there a place that if we wanted to further refine that, that's already established here, that would fit under?
Yeah, I feel like
Building
perhaps
relationship with the community, right.
create more contact between community and businesses, really. I mean,
Yeah.
like that's what that's doing.
I'm happy to add a line item in for not conduct the market study, but maybe distribute the market study.
Make available.
Make available.
Yeah. Big font, something.
And then really, again, too, to say that if further detail is needed, the steps we'll take are ... are not exclusive of any additional steps that we would take. So if we come up with ideas that we think are going to advance these goals, as long as we have, you know, the to make it happen category, as long as it can fall under that, right, we'll have an opportunity to bring those further details to the city, right?
By no means is this an exhaust of this. This is just a goalpost list that can remind us of where our focuses are, to kind of keep us within scope, within a cohesive direction over a series of years.
And I also want to mention that my past experience with goal setting is that once you have the buckets between now and budget, if you do have some ideas, get them in so that helps the budget officer inform how much they're going to put into those buckets, how much they're going to allocate to those resources. Because something like that might end up costing funds that, you know, wasn't otherwise thought of, and then that could be
But it definitely impacts like our rebuilding of the 91 corridor.
Exactly.
So,
Council Penamarath?
Yeah, I'm looking at sustainability, and I just feel like there's a lot of good stuff about solar power, but I feel like there's something missing. And there are people who understand environmental stuff here much better than I do. But I'm just wondering about the very first one under sustainability, carbon footprint, where it says A, reduce our use of carbon sources. Maybe we could, and the first one is establish standards for solar power. I'm just wondering if we could maybe modify that to establish standards for solar power and reduction of greenhouse gases. It just feels a little bit more robust to me.
Does it seem redundant, given that A is actually reduce our use of carbon sources?
Well, it's just all the implementation steps are pretty specific, and so I kind of wanted to broaden that a little bit because it's not just about solar power. There's a lot of things that we can do that would involve standards that would help reduce greenhouse gases.
Clean energy, solar power to 100.
Yeah, establish standards for clean energy and reduction of greenhouse gases.
If we're going to make that as an amendment, let's go ahead and list it as an amendment so we can, when we as amended, you know what that list is going to look like. Or Hector is recording that way. But again, I would say it's important not to get too detailed at this point in time, and I really feel like that falls very, very well under reduce our use of carbon sources.
Okay, so I think what you suggested was establish standards for clean energy rather than solar power. That was what we heard. Is everybody okay with that?
Anybody object to that? Okay, so that would be one amendment. Other than the editorial, the edit changes, right? So
Those are already incorporated.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right. So we don't need to mention those, do we? No, okay. So far as amended is just this one item. Anybody else? I'll entertain a motion. Councilor Penamarath?
I move to approve the goals as amended.
second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the citywide goals for 2022-23 as amended. Is there any discussion? I would just ask that you thank the staff on our behalf for their great additions to our goals. It's made good goals better. Yeah. Roll call, please.
Council Clark,
Yes.
Council Penamarath,
Yes.
Council Gregor,
Yes.
Council Waters,
Yes.
Council Carter.
Yes.
Motion carried, Mayor.
Thank you, Hector. Okay, so if there's nothing else, we will adjourn this meeting at 5:59. Well done, council. Very well done. Good job. I want to say again what an incredible job you did on the goals, really, seriously.
Happy by it.
Canva? Is this Canva? Would you?
Publisher.
Publisher.
Jordan, have you wanted to set up for the next? Yes, we're just gonna add 2 more tables this way. Okay. But you all go grab some pizza. There's salad over there.
Should we just leave our stuff where? 22-23 as amended. Is there any discussion? I would just ask that you thank the staff on our behalf for their great additions to our goals. It's made good goals better. Yep. Roll call, please.
Councilor Clark,
Yes.
Councilor Panemra,
Yes.
Councilor Greider,
Yes.
Councilor Byers,
Yes.
Councilor Parra Miller.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mayor.
Thank you, Hector. Okay, so if there's nothing else, we will adjourn this meeting at 5:59. Well done, council. Very well done.